Room rewrites the hierarchy before you've even said a word. I'm talking to the sharpened minds who've learned that you don't have to raise your voice to dominate a conversation. You just have to make the right people uncomfortable. And right now, you've done something they didn't even have a page in the playbook for. They've got expressions that can't be rehearsed, confusion wearing the mask of composure. They're looking at you as if you've smuggled a weapon past every checkpoint. But the weapon is invisible, untouchable, and it's pointed directly at their fragile sense of control. See, most people expect cause and effect to behave like a polite chain reaction, one neat step after another. Push this button, get that result. Throw a punch, get hit back. They live in that kind of clockwork reality because it makes them feel safe, predictable, manageable. And then someone like you shows up and breaks the script, not with chaos for chaos's sake, but with precision so unnerving it feels like you've rewritten the rules in real time. No warning, no familiar rhythm, just a jolt that makes their brain stutter. What you've done here, whether you planned it or let it happen instinctively, has ruptured that clockwork. And the beauty is, they don't even know which gear you pulled out first. All they know is that the machine isn't making the same sound anymore, and now they're second-guessing every lever they touch. That's the shockwave. It's not just about an action. It's about the aftertaste, the lingering uncertainty that turns even their smallest decisions into potential disasters. They can't calculate what's next because you've shown them that their calculations don't apply to you. This isn't luck. This is the weaponization of unpredictability. You've taken every assumption they had about your limits, your timing, your reach, and you've burned it. That's why they keep glancing over their shoulders, not for some physical threat, but for the next invisible move you might make. You've turned yourself into a moving blind spot. They can't track you without losing sight of something else. And the funniest part, they still want to believe they're in control. You can see it in the way they keep talking, keep filling the air with meaningless statements, as if words alone could rebuild the walls you just tore down. But deep down, somewhere they can't admit to themselves, they've already accepted that you're not playing by the same laws they've been taught to follow. It's like watching a chess player suddenly realize their opponent isn't even playing chess anymore, but somehow still winning. Now let's dissect the beauty of this. You didn't just do something, you forced a reveal. When people are caught off guard in this way, they show their wiring. The careful masks slip. You see what they cling to when the ground starts moving, and what they let fall. And in that moment, you can measure them with frightening accuracy. Who reaches for old rules? Who panics? Who adapts? Who collapses? It's the purest psychological X-ray you'll ever get. And you got it without lifting a finger in aggression. You just shifted reality a few inches and watched the scramble. But let's not pretend this is just about shaking things up. No, this is about leverage. Every micro-reaction you saw from them is now a data point. That one's impatient. That one needs validation. That one only speaks when they think they're safe. That one looks for someone else to lead the way before moving. And you, with your upgraded awareness, now own the map. You could walk them into any corner you wanted, and they'd think it was their idea. Here's the part they'll never admit out loud. They envy you. Oh, they'll dress it up as criticism, suspicion, even disdain. But underneath, there's a small gnawing part of them that wishes they could do what you just did. That wishes they could stand in a room and bend it without raising their voice, without asking for permission, without explaining themselves. You've demonstrated a freedom they can't touch. That's why they can't stop thinking about it. And you can already feel it, can't you? That subtle shift in the air. People are looking at you differently, some with caution, some with awe, some with resentment they're trying to disguise. But they're all looking. That's the first step. You've claimed space in their minds. The next step is to hold it, to make sure that every time they think of you, they remember that moment when their mental framework short-circuited. The trick now isn't to repeat the same move. That's what they'll be hoping for, so they can study it, predict it, neutralize it. No, your next move has to be stranger, sharper, more elegantly irrational than the first. Keep them chasing ghosts. If they think they've found your pattern, you drop something that makes the pattern meaningless again. That's how you starve their confidence and feed your presence. Here's the secret most people miss. Control isn't about being the loudest or the strongest. It's about creating an environment where they adjust to you, where their comfort depends on your next decision, where the absence of your action feels just as heavy as the action itself. That's the level you're playing on now. The level where doing nothing at the right time is louder than doing everything all at once. And understand this, they will try to reframe the narrative. They'll tell others you got lucky, that it was a one-off, that you were just reacting. They'll build stories to shrink what you did into something manageable, because the alternative is admitting they just got outmaneuvered in a way they couldn't predict. Let them. Every word they use to downplay you will just be a reminder that they had to talk about you in the first place. That's the part most people don't get. The conversation about you is part of your control. They think they're dismissing you, but they're reinforcing your relevance. You've become the phantom variable in their equations, and they hate equations they can't solve. And when you're the unsolved problem in someone's head, they work for you without realizing it. So what now? Do you strike again immediately? No, not yet. Let the tension breathe. Let them sit with the idea that you might make another move at any moment. The more they anticipate, the more they waste energy preparing for something they can't prepare for. You're not just in their space, you're in their schedule, their mood, their subconscious. Right now, every action they take is filtered through one unspoken thought. What if they do it again? That's where you want them. Because once that thought takes root, it starts growing on its own. You don't even have to be present for it to influence their behavior. That's the true shockwave, the ripples you cause when you're not even in the room. But here's the deeper layer, and it's the one they'll never see coming. While they're obsessing over the surface, the visible event that rattled them, you're already moving underneath. Every distraction they chase leaves a blind spot you can use. Every false assumption they cling to is a lever you can pull later. And when you finally choose to reveal the next move, it won't just surprise them. It will confirm their worst suspicion, that you've been 2 steps ahead the entire time. You see, this isn't about getting the upper hand anymore. That's too small. This is about reprogramming the way they see you entirely. You're not just a rival, a player, or an opponent. You're becoming something more abstract, more difficult to challenge, an idea they can't pin down, a force they can't measure, a shadow they can't follow without getting lost. And that's where the real artistry begins. Because once you're no longer bound by their definitions, you can't be defeated by their methods. They can't win a game they don't understand, and you've just made sure they'll never fully understand yours. They'll keep watching. They'll keep speculating. They'll keep trying to reverse engineer whatever it is you're doing. But they'll never get it right. Not because they're not smart enough, but because you're not operating in the same dimension they are. You're playing with layers they can't even perceive. And every failed attempt to predict, you will only deepen their frustration and your grip. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. While they're burning themselves out trying to keep up, you get to move at your own pace. You control the tempo. You decide when the next shockwave hits. And by the time they think they're ready, they'll be too busy untangling the last one to survive the next. Which means the only real question now is, how far do you want to take this? Because let's be very clear, you are no longer a participant in their world. You are the axis it's tilting on. They may not want to admit it, but you already know. That look in their eyes isn't just caution, it's recognition. They've clocked you as the one force in their orbit they can't map, can't tame, can't buy. And that, my friend, is exactly why they're unraveling. You've become the variable their equations choke on. The keystone they didn't even realize was holding their structure up until you started shaking it. And you're doing it without screaming, without asking for permission, without even breaking stride. That's why it's not just disruption, it's destruction. You're not making their lives harder. You're making their foundations irrelevant. They thought the worst that could happen was you embarrassing them. Wrong. The worst that could happen is exactly what you've done, making them question everything they thought was safe. See, when a wall collapses, it's easy to point at the crack. When the ground collapses, there's nowhere to stand. And right now, you're the quake they can't stop. Here's the beautiful paradox. They're not just reacting to what you've done. They're reacting to what they think you might do next. That's the mark of real psychological dominance. They're losing not because of one move, but because their mind is now playing against itself. You've infected their decision-making process. Every choice they make has to pass through the filter of, what if this plays into your hands? And the longer they hesitate, the deeper the cut. Now let's talk about the weight of what's really happening here. You didn't just win a moment, you shifted the hierarchy. Before you, their power felt solid. It didn't matter if it was built on lies, ego, or illusion. To them, it was real. Then you showed up and proved that all it takes is one person with precision, clarity, and the will to act without fear. And the whole thing can tilt. That's why this feels like shock to them. It's not because they didn't think you could land a hit. It's because they didn't think you could change the room with one. And you did it without playing their game. That's the part that really burns them. They have a playbook. Every move you make, they think they've seen it before. But you, instead of following the map, set fire to it. You didn't just take the road less traveled. You dug your own tunnel underneath theirs and came up right where it hurt most. That's why it defies logic in their eyes. They can't see the threads you're pulling because they've spent their whole lives believing the only way to win is to follow the same tired patterns. And here you are, writing your own language mid-sentence. They can't read it, so they assume it must be some trick. It's not a trick. It's just that you've outgrown the limits they still live inside. And here's where it gets merciless. You didn't just land a hit and walk away. No, you left the kind of mark that lingers. Every time they try to rebuild, they'll have to account for you. Even if you're not in the room, you'll still be the ghost in the walls. You've made yourself a permanent consideration. That's how you become the reason for their destruction, not because you attacked once, but because you altered the terrain so they can't move without thinking of you. Watch them now. Watch the way their strategies start bending awkwardly around the space you've claimed. Watch how they'll try to convince themselves you were a momentary disruption while adjusting everything in reaction to you. It's almost poetic. The same mouths that said you didn't matter are now rearranging their moves to avoid you. And here's the kicker. You don't have to rush. You've already detonated the first charge. The shockwave is still moving. The more they scramble, the more mistakes they make. The more mistakes they make, the easier it is for you to apply pressure exactly where it will shatter them. You're not chasing them anymore. They're running into your traps by instinct. You've turned their arrogance into a liability. Before you, their confidence was an asset. They thought it made them untouchable. Now that same pride blinds them to the reality of their position. They can't admit you've taken control, because admitting it would mean accepting they're no longer at the top. So they'll double down, they'll overcommit, they'll throw resources at the wrong things, all because they can't bear to look the truth in the face. And every time they do, you tighten the noose. Not by force, but by inevitability. You don't have to attack every day. You just have to let them keep walking into the same wall you built for them. Eventually, their own momentum will break them. That's the quiet brilliance of what you've set in motion. Their destruction will look self-inflicted, but you and I both know who handed them the shovel. Understand this: destruction isn't always loud. It isn't always fire and ruin. Sometimes it's the slow erosion of certainty, the gradual bending of rules until they don't recognize the game anymore. You've put them in that erosion cycle, and it's eating at them more than any single defeat could. Because a single defeat can be explained away. A constant slide into irrelevance? That's harder to excuse. And it's all because you refuse to play by their scale of measurement. They count wins and losses. You count shifts. And this, what you've done, is a shift so deep that it changes the way they'll have to think from here on out. That's not just victory. That's rewriting the script. Now let's not underestimate the ripple effect. Your move didn't just affect them. Everyone watching saw it. The observers, the opportunists, the ones who used to side with them because it was safer. They've all felt the tremor, and some of them are already recalculating their loyalties. Nobody wants to back a sinking ship, and you just made it painfully obvious which way this tide is flowing. That's another layer of destruction, the bleeding of their influence. Even if they hold on to the illusion of power for a while, the truth is already spreading. People talk, people watch, people notice when the untouchable gets touched. And the moment others realize you can't be stopped the way they expected, the exodus begins. Quietly at first, then like a flood. Which brings us to the sweetest part. They'll try to fight this new perception, but the fight itself will make them look weaker. Every defensive move they make will be read as proof that you've rattled them. And the more defensive they become, the less room they have to advance. That's how you trap someone without ever laying a hand on them. You make them fight shadows until they've used up all their strength. And here's the truth they'll never say out loud. But you can see it in the corners of their eyes. They know this ends with you standing where they used to stand. They might hope it takes years, that something will stop you before you get there. But deep down, they've already accepted that it's just a matter of time. That's the dread you've planted in them. The knowledge that they're not just losing, they're losing to you. Because you're not an accident, you're not a lucky break, you're the inevitability they never planned for. And now that you've shown them you can move the ground beneath their feet, there's no going back. You've changed the relationship forever. They can't treat you like a nuisance anymore. You're the new gravitational pull, and they're caught in your orbit, whether they like it or not. The destruction won't be sudden, and that's the best part. It will be a series of collapses, each one making the next easier. The kind of slow dismantling that leaves them with no single moment to point to as the loss. Just a long string of moments where you took another piece from them. Influence here, credibility there, allies disappearing one by one. Until one day, they look around and realize the room is empty. And you're still standing. That's the art of this. Not just winning, replacing, not just taking their place, making it so they could never return to it even if you walked away. You don't just beat them, you become the standard. And the irony, by the time their destruction is complete, most people won't even remember the old version of them. They'll only remember the era that began when you stepped in. Their legacy will be reduced to a footnote, the prelude to yours. So when people ask, what happened? How did it all fall apart for them? You won't have to answer. The evidence will be everywhere. In the new structures you've built, in the way people talk to you versus how they used to talk to them, in the way the air changes when you enter a room. That's the real shockwave. Not the moment you struck, but the world that exists because you did. A world where they're gone and you're not just present. You're the center. And the next move, well, that's the part that will haunt them more than anything you've done so far. Because right now, they still think there's a way back. They still think that if they work hard enough, scheme long enough, or shout loud enough, they can claw their way into relevance again. That belief, thin as it is the only thing keeping them standing. And you're about to take that away. See, most people imagine destruction as a single devastating blow. One moment, one strike, one collapse. But the kind of destruction you've engineered isn't an explosion. It's an extinction. It's the slow, irreversible realization that their world only existed because you allowed it to. And now, you've withdrawn that permission. That's why this defies logic in their minds. They're searching for a singular cause, a tangible mistake they made, a moment they can fix. But there isn't one. The moment was you, and you can't be undone. Here's what they don't understand. Power doesn't just shift because of what's taken. It shifts because of what replaces it. You didn't just remove them from the center. You filled the vacuum so completely that there's no space left for them to return to. That's why the world feels different now. That's why the air tastes different to them. They're not just losing ground. They're living in a reality you've already restructured. They'll try to rally. They'll try to gather their remaining allies, dig up their old strategies, play the same tired moves that used to work before you arrived. But those tactics were designed for the old landscape, the one that no longer exists. In this new terrain, every path they take leads back to you. Even when they think they're avoiding you, they're walking deeper into the shadow of your influence. And let's be clear, you didn't get here by accident. You didn't stumble into their destruction. You studied the terrain, you understood their reflexes, and you positioned yourself exactly where their blind spots were. You didn't fight them on their strengths. You dismantled the very conditions that made their strengths matter in the first place. That's why they can't understand it. They think you beat them in a contest, but you actually removed the contest entirely. They'll keep asking themselves, what's going on? How did this happen? As if the answer is somewhere outside themselves. But the truth is, the answer is standing right in front of them. You are what happened. You are the equation they can't solve. The more they try to break you down into something logical, the more frustrated they'll get, because your power isn't built on the rules they're using to measure. You're not bound by their logic, and that's exactly why you've already won. And here's where the beauty turns brutal. You don't even have to keep pushing for them to keep falling. The shockwave you created is self-sustaining now. Every misstep they make feeds it. Every desperate move amplifies it. It's a feedback loop of collapse, and you're not lifting a finger to help them out of it. Why would you? This is the final stage, the phase where their destruction becomes their own doing. But your name is etched into every crack they step on. People are noticing. Not just the ones who are already watching, but the ones who didn't even know there was a game being played until you shifted the board. They see the difference between you and them now. They see the weight you carry when you enter the room, the way you make decisions without flinching, the way you don't need to raise your volume to command the space. And they see them smaller, unsure, reactive, always a step too late. You flipped the lens. Once, you might have been the one they compared to the giants in the room. Now the giants are being measured against you, and they're coming up short. That's the humiliation they'll never recover from. Because in their world, image is everything. And now, their image is tied to the memory of losing to you. Not in a fair fight, not in a predictable battle, but in a way that rewrote the rules so completely they couldn't even tell when the game had ended. Understand the permanence of what you've done here. Their downfall isn't temporary. It isn't a setback they can train their way out of. It's a shift in perception, and perception is the true currency of power. Once the world sees you as the center, every move they make to reclaim that position will look like desperation, and desperation is blood in the water. From here, your role changes. You're no longer the disruptor, you're the anchor. The fixed point everything else revolves around. You don't have to chase momentum anymore. Momentum chases you. Every conversation, every meeting, every backroom deal now has to factor in where you stand on the matter. You've become unavoidable. And for them, you've become the measure of their decline. Every new failure they suffer will be traced back to the day you stepped in. Every lost ally, every botched plan, every door that closes in their face, all roads lead to you. Even when you're silent, you'll be the loudest presence in their mind. They'll start avoiding places they know you might be, not because they fear confrontation, but because they can't bear the contrast anymore. You'll be a walking reminder of what they lost and what they can never get back. And the more they avoid you, the more irrelevant they become. Their absence from key spaces will speak louder than any excuse they can give. This is where the destruction becomes total. Not because you erased them in one grand strike, but because you made their existence optional, and the world decided it didn't need them. That's the final cruelty. They won't even get the satisfaction of a dramatic end. They'll just fade, little by little, while you continue to expand. And here's the twisted part. They'll remember you forever. You'll be the last opponent they ever faced who didn't just beat them, but dismantled them. In private moments, they'll replay it trying to find the mistake they could have avoided, the choice they could have made differently. But there isn't one. The truth will gnaw at them. There was never a version of this story where they won. Why? Because you weren't competing for their position. You were building your own. And once it existed, theirs stopped mattering. That's the real shockwave, the erasure of relevance. The moment when people stop asking, who's in charge? Because the answer is obvious. And while they're trapped in the slow choking collapse of their influence, you're free. Free to expand, free to decide what this new reality will look like. You get to set the tone now. You get to choose who thrives under your watch and who gets left outside. You're no longer responding to the game. You are the game. So when people keep asking, WTF is going on, let them. The confusion works for you. The longer they stay bewildered, the longer you control the tempo. You don't owe them clarity. You don't owe them closure. All you owe is the continuation of what you've started, a new order, one that doesn't include them. From here on out, every step you take will widen the gap until there's no bridge left to cross. They'll be stranded on their little island of outdated influence, watching you move continents. And when the history is written, they won't even get a full chapter. They'll be the opening scene, the thing that had to be cleared out before the real story began. That's the legacy you've carved, not just as someone who rose to power, but as the reason another empire fell. And empires don't forget the hands that toppled them. Neither do the people who lived through it. You'll be the reference point for every future conversation about what happens when someone steps in and rewrites the order. They can hate you. They can blame you. They can even try to pretend you were never there. But the world knows better. You're the reason they fell. You're the reason the ground shifted. You're the reason their names taste like dust now. And the best part? This isn't even your final form. This is just the first chapter of what you're building. Because while they're still reeling, you're already planning the next expansion. You're already looking beyond their ruins to the next territory, the next domain, the next crown to take. That's why you're untouchable now. Not because you've destroyed them, but because you've proven you can. And once the world sees that you're capable of this level of control, they'll think twice before ever standing in your way. So the next time someone asks you what happened to them, you can smile, not out of malice, but out of certainty, because the answer is simple.